realized I sent the posters and the file was 18 megs, which I usually try not to do, but I'm glad you received my email. Rebecca, do you want to start and introduce and do everything? Because this is definitely the Design Philadelphia and AIA's project.
Sure, I will start it off. So welcome everyone. My name is Rebecca Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of Design Philadelphia, which is the signature program of the Center for Architecture and Design, which is a nonprofit organization that the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, founded almost 20 years ago here in Philadelphia to do public programming about architecture and design. So I'm really grateful to be here. This year we got a grant from the National Endowment of Arts and funded this project, which was to acknowledge that this is the 100th anniversary, the Centennial of the 19th Amendment, which secured the right to vote for women. And as Christine and I and others who we've talked to in this project, sort of as it was developed, said, you know, that was a very significant step towards equality, but it was a pretty incomplete one. And so we wanted to look at how designs can advance equality in all different ways, because we know that equality is not yet achieved, right? For many, many people and in many parts of the world, et cetera. So this project I'm really proud of. I think it's been an important piece of Design Philadelphia this year. And I'm excited that even though it couldn't be this amazing, fabulous thing at Cherry Street Pier like it was supposed to, I think, you know, due to the creativity of our curator and our graphics designer and the designers in these projects, I think we really kind of created something special that hopefully will live longer, right, than the festival, that we'll be able to share a lot of this stuff. So with that, I want to introduce Christine Tan from Fork Spoon, who we invited to be our guest curator. Christine is on the steering committee of Design Philadelphia, did some really cool programming and installations last year for Design Philadelphia, and is in general a incredibly creative and smart woman, and it's been my pleasure to work with her over the last couple of months. We've spent a lot of time on the phone together.
A lot.
So with that, I will turn it over to Christine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine. As Rebecca said, I'm a designer. I studied architecture, and I've kind of moved into this realm of like built environments, mostly with interior architecture and anything that's kind of human scale. I have a studio with my partner called Fork Spoon. We are based in Philadelphia. Long history short, our kind of ethos on design is that it should be for everyone, that it's not supposed to be about this idea of some high-end object, but that design as a construct can actually help build a better world, a more organized world. And we see that in very invisible ways, unfortunately. So my mission has always been to try and show people what design is and why it's important. So this was the perfect dovetail of a project to get me out of the world of interiors and think about conceptualizing those ideas into a exhibition. So this was our baby, pretty much. We worked with some amazing designers, and we wanted to attempt to figure out how do we interpret this idea of virtual exhibition. As everyone knows, due to COVID, we cannot gather. It's not safe for anyone. When Rebecca had initially talked to me, this was last year, definitely before COVID was even a thing, we anticipated that we would have some type of physical exhibition, that we could design some really cool armatures for the display of projects. Once that happened, everyone was kind of in a hustle to figure out what does that mean in terms of a virtual exhibition. We saw a lot of different options. For us, what we wanted to do was try and push the boundaries of what we were seeing and experiment a little bit with the format of what that means to be a virtual exhibition or to interact with projects. Due to the nature that even though Design Philadelphia is very localized, we now have the ability to span beyond just our city, as well as have people interact with projects that you would normally see in a gallery setting and you would just look at. Now you are able to use your phones, which everybody usually has access to, that they can now interact with these projects in a little different way. So we were able to work with each individual designer that exhibited in this project to expand their project slightly through an AR or VR interaction so that people can really play with these projects. And I think that really tells the power of design, is that you can kind of elaborate these ideas. And and I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. We just chose this particular method. In order to access these things, we have posted a poster series that our brilliant brand identity designer, Frankie Ehlerker, put together. You can access the filters that we've created that you interact with through a QR code on those posters. So just with your regular phone, you can bring up the camera and it'll scan the QR code and it'll take you right to that individual interactive piece. So that is where we are sitting right now with all our wonderful designers, including the interactive team and our brand identity designer, to talk about this project. Rebecca, you're muted.
Sure am. See? So if we could have, how about Lindsay, you want to go first, introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your project? That would be great.
Sure. Well, thank you again for having me and for the invitation to take part in this event and in the exhibition. I'm going to share a quick presentation of the project. So I'll share my screen. And the name of my practice is WIP, which stands for Women in Practice Work in Progress. It's actually located in Brooklyn, New York. And founded on the in-progress nature of architectural practice and the collective power of women engaged in it. So obviously, some of the themes that were raised in the introduction to this event really resonate with the kind of ethos of my practice, which exists in sort of three entities: a design studio, a broader community, and a design collaborative, which is a platform for members of that community to work together. And it builds on a kind of legacy of women-based feminist design practices that have existed in the disciplinary history of architecture. And our studio is a practice that approaches projects that engage the public in unconventional ways, challenging the norms of their existing conditions. So it's appropriate that the project I'm sharing as part of the exhibition is a project that also addresses the kind of exclusion of women and inequality that exists in another field, the field of sports, and in particular, the space of the sports bar. So Title IX is a future women's sports bar in Brooklyn that will go against the conventional cisgender male norms of the sports bar. And an article published earlier this year on Madam Architect showcased the ambition of the project to be a productive space of exception, a new kind of venue based on values that resist everything that is typical and expected of that kind of venue, and therefore critical of the broader established social order. So of course, women's sports has recently and historically been a powerful platform of activism and political action towards equality and addressing societal issues that continue to create an unequal playing field for women, people of color, and for gender nonconforming populations. But the values of Title IX go beyond inclusivity. It also aims to be a venue and a food and beverage establishment that's founded on equitable principles and sustainable practices. And I thought I'd share quickly a video clip or an audio clip by its founder, Mary Vaughn, who's also joined us. So just quickly.
Title IX is a women's sports bar focused on building equity into its concept, programming, and design. This is an inclusive space flexibly designed to be conducive to community events and spectatorship of women's sports.
So when we approached the design concept, we began with the environmental graphic of the court or the sports field and questioned, much like this reference on the right, whether the spatial language could enable multiple and dynamic uses rather than just a singular fixed layout. And of course, learned from the history of Olympic graphics as well, with a particular interest in Deborah Sussman's 1984 LA Olympic scheme, which transformed the urban space with an overlay of colorful and sort of celebratory environmental graphics and architectural objects rather than the construction of new single-use buildings. So as a design process, we kind of sampled from geometries found on sports courts and fields to develop a kind of graphic and architectural spatial language, and ultimately create the kind of footprint of the bar, the future bar. And here you can see how this space will transform throughout the day within this framework for different kinds of program, including a daytime cafe, post-game team gatherings, panel of speakers, CSA produce box pickup, and dining venue. So what you see on the exhibition website and in the kind of virtual space of the filters that were created is the environment, which is sort of appropriately presented as this kind of open-ended, boundless space that can transform and change for these different uses. And just a kind of final closing note on how we sort of prepared for this virtual exhibition in collaboration with the organizers today. You can see here a screenshot of the digital model, which we sort of finalized and packaged as if it were a physical model that we were shipping off for, display in a gallery or in the in-person exhibition. But given the kind of added dimension of this virtual format, allowed us to really take advantage of the digital medium to showcase the space as a virtually inhabitable environment. So I'll stop my share there and we can discuss the other projects, but thank you again for including the project in the exhibition.
Great. Thank
Thank you, Lindsay.
That's awesome.
That was a great presentation. I was
Go ahead, Christine.
telling Hannah earlier, I was like, this is very informal, no need to present anything, but I loved every single slide that you put together, and it was very cohesive and concise, and I really enjoyed like the process that we went through this, and I was really glad that you were part of this.
Thanks.
Sure. Nancy and Renee, you want to go up next?
Sure. Again, we'll also thank Design Philly for letting us be part of it. And it was a perfect segue into what Renee and I had been working on. And she knows, and I just like the world to know, that I was a super fan of Renee when she was on Project Runway, and knew she was from Philly. And when I found out I was going to be on it, I wasn't allowed to contact her, but it was like in my bucket list to meet Renee Hill one day, and never got around to it. And then here I am in New York, fabric shopping at a store where I recognized fabric she had on the show, and I'm talking about her to the sales rep, turn around, and in comes, in New York City, Renee Hill. And magic happened, and we just knew we had to work together. Right, Renee?
Yeah, I think that was definitely destiny in effect. Because as you said, once I saw you on Project Runway, it was like, oh my God, she's so creative. She thinks outside the box like me. She's amazing. Oh my God, I got to meet her. So, and like you said, both of us being from Philadelphia, we just had to make sure we made something happen. And then that's when we started our discussions for collaboration.
Yeah, we met like right away, even before the pandemic. We're like, we're going to do something together. Then the COVID hit, and we're like, well, we're going to still do something. We don't know what now. And then comes Design Philly to the rescue and celebrating the Centennial for the suffrage movement. I mean, how perfect is that? And then what really connected Renee, I think, is we have such an authentic relationship, such an honest and vulnerable relationship. So when the Black Lives Matters movement, when I don't like to call it movement, I want it to be a way of life, when it all came to a head, we just had these very open conversations. And the biggest thing was trust and allowing yourself to be vulnerable. and accepting of each other. And that really then again turned into what we wanted to do with Design Philly. We were educating each of us about how we felt, me as a white woman of privilege, and Renee as a Black woman. And we understood how educating ourselves was so important. And that was, and is, I think, the foundation for our project.
Yes, I think that for me, when you talk about equality and when you talk about empowerment, when you talk about these things, you have to be educated. And that's what gives you that level of empowerment, because now you know, you have the information, you have the tools so you can fight that fight. And when you don't have the necessary tools to fight the fight, it just falls on deaf ears. So for us, we really began to have those challenging conversations, because it is challenging. It's new to a lot of people. It's uncomfortable, but because we have that conversation, and we just learned a lot about each other. And I always consider myself a student for life. Like, I'm always learning from everyone, like young, old, it doesn't really matter to me. So for us, it allowed me to learn some things about myself. And even when we began to take on this project and do this exhibition, I learned a lot. I learned so much about the women and about myself and how I need to stay educated, because in order for me to continue to discuss these issues and have a voice with these, I have to be educated. I have to know. I have to have the information. And for us, creating transparent solidarity was just like a segue into this educational process. We just wanted to educate people and allow them the necessary tools to be able to fight this fight, because it's ongoing and it's going to continue until we can see some real change, because like we're in the Centennial, it's been, so it's like now we're in the next 100 years. So we have to, figure out how we can be impactful. What is our role in that? And us creating this exhibit, creating this print, and talking about these women who were very active in the suffrage movement, it was just really, really empowering for me.
Yeah,
and for those, I'm sorry, Nancy, go ahead. I was just going to give people a little bit of context of what your guys' project was.
That's what I was just going to get into. So
Perfect.
What we did was we designed two pieces. One is a signature coat of Renee's, the Versa coat, which I'll, she can talk about. And then I did a transparent tote bag. And we wanted it to be transparent, but I also wanted it to connect with what's happening in the world and with all of these personal protected items that we need. Just like we don't want people to have to hide anymore, we want everything to be so visible and transparent. So if I'm using gloves or a mask or hand sanitizer, it's actually on the bag, on the outside. We're not hiding it. Women have always been at the forefront of promoting safety and health. And so it's a play on that. Let's not hide things. Let's not hide people's voices anymore, not hide what we need to be doing. And also, just because we care about the environment and sustainability, I end up using a lot of scraps from Renee's coat. And so the bag has a lot of different layers of what we were trying to get across. And then your coat, Renee, if you want to talk about that.
So I designed the coat some time ago, and it's a versatile coat. So in that, I wanted to incorporate the coat because we as women have so many different challenges and roles. So based on how you wear the coat, which is between like 3 to 5 different ways you can wear the coat, this is demonstrating, or it's a play on those roles and challenges, because at the end of the day, we need to empower ourselves to be able to change and get into those roles. So having this print that we created with the woman's names and with the voter's hand, And it almost looks like a houndstooth. It's so amazing. I just love this print to death. But having this print to me and being able to wear this print with my coat, that is the ultimate of empowerment for me. I can't wait to wear it. I'm just like so psyched to carry the tote, carry the tote and wear the coat, like, because it's just, and you have women who risk their lives to fight for the rights of women to vote. Like, that's just like, you know, I feel like, what am I doing? This little bit I'm doing is just really like nothing. Like, I'm looking at, I have to like really reflect and say, what am I doing? Like, these women risk their lives. Like, their lives are on the line to fight for us to be in the position that we are in today, me as a Black woman. So just to be able to have this coat and to show the versatility and have the print and have the tote, it's just so empowering for me. And I really appreciate, you know, the opportunity. And like I said, I love Nancy and I love working with Nancy. And I think that for me, giving this to other people and having it be a conversation and being able to educate them in this minuscule way is kind of, and you know, it really warms me inside.
And I just wanted, before, I know we're going talking a lot, we all are so passionate, I just need to mention that the women, Lucky and I, we were installing the actual window today, and it was so profound because these women, Augusta Chisel, Estelle Hall Young, and the Fortin sisters from Philadelphia, they were the first in establishing organizations for Neighborhood Young Women's Christian Association, and then Philadelphia Female Anti-Slavery Society, and then the first interracial group in the suffrage movement. And there was all about equality and getting out the vote. And here we are, and I'm installing this window, and just so happened that Project Vote Philly had these amazing art vote posters that we were able to get, and we're carrying on their legacy. I'm like getting goosebumps, very chilled, that here, for the women that we're honoring, we're carrying on their legacy. This is the timing of this and getting the vote out. And I'm proud to be part of this and to be proud of Design Philly. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy and Renee. If you guys are in Philadelphia, please visit the Center for Architecture and Design at 1218 Arch Street. They have the coat and the bag in the window, so you can take a look at it. Rebecca, can they make an appointment to go in and take a closer look?
Yeah, if they reach out, we don't have any sort of set hours, but if you reach out and you want to come by, you can, but you can really see it the best from the window, because otherwise it's just, there's nothing else in the space, right? Right now, COVID, we finally cleaned it up, that's it. But it really does look amazing, and I'm so grateful to Nancy and Renee for the kind of calling out of the women that have done this work, like risk, like you said, Renee, like risk their lives. And so it's just we're just so grateful for you participating in this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Next up we have Rebecca, who's on our list.
Hannah,
you are up.
Hannah, yes.
Hello.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi. Thank you to everybody who presented so far. It was such interesting work to hear about. And thank you to people who helped put on this wonderful event. When Christine told me about this prompt, it brought immediately to mind a project that I had been thinking about for a long time. And it gave me that final push to get it done. And I'm going to share with you the final website right now as I talk through it. I'm just going to share my screen.
And also tell us about your work as a designer, what type of work you're interested in, and then we can, just a quick intro.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Hannah. I'm currently a graphic designer at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, where I work on exhibition graphics design. First, can everyone see my screen? I don't know if it's showing yet. Okay. All right. So the project that I've been working on I would say for the last 10 years, but really came together in the last year with my sister, is about this community of Iranian Americans that I've lived in my entire life. Until recently, I realized with a community living in diaspora. For me, it was just, it was home, it was family. And this community that I've been a part of while being born in the United States, being in California, and then my entire aunts and parents being born in Iran, it definitely caused a bit of a, I would say, sort of a split identity for me growing up. It was this idea of American outside of the home and Iranian in the home. When I was a kid, I tried to keep that very separate, because as a child, you don't want to seem different from anyone else. But as I got older, it was something that I began to take more pride in, and I started to seek acceptance for being Iranian American. And then now I no longer am looking for acceptance. I've learned to accept myself. I have a community that accepts me. Now it's more about fostering empathy and creating understanding and awareness for us as a community here. And that's what really this project was about. My family is quite large. My mom is the youngest of 7, and most of my uncles and aunts, they're the age of most people's grandparents. And unfortunately, that means that around this time, I'm beginning to lose some of them. And in that grief that I'm going through with losing my family members, I'm also starting to realize that I'm losing my only direct link to my heritage, to Iran. And that's what created really this project for me, because I started gathering stories and images just for myself so I can sort of create that same world for my children one day. And then I realized that it's better for me to share it with everyone and create that empathy and understanding with other people by sharing what I've collected. And this is this project here called Two Selves. And it's about this idea of being in between both Iran and America. And I would say that when I was a child, I definitely began to understand this, like, I would say this separation. I was sort of the cultural go-between between my parents and American culture. I remember once I tried to explain to my parents the concept of the sleepover, which for every child is just sort of like a rite of passage, but for my parents, just did not understand it. And I would say, oh, it's when, you know, children, they go to each other's houses and they hang out and then they sleep. And my parents just they were like, what's wrong with your own bed? What's wrong with your own family? Well, you want to just go live there? And on the flip, and it's funny looking back on it, but on the flip side, I also remember having my friends over and them looking at all of these images that I had of my family in Iran, and the way that they looked at them, I could see in their minds that they were just shocked that this wasn't the image of Iran that they were taught or they were exposed to. And I remember being pleased, you know, that they were so interested in my family, but also uncomfortable because I knew why they were shocked and I knew why they were surprised and fascinated. And it was just because this wasn't what they were exposed to. But this is what I was exposed to. And this is what I knew of Iran. It was, my parents had like a happy childhood. It was fun. It was their ideal. And it didn't fit this idea of immigration that we have in the United States. And through this project, I wanted to not only challenge this idea that Americans have of Iran and Iranians, but also this idea challenge the idea we have about immigration as a whole. We've been taught this like romanticized idea of, you know, the immigrant in America, someone who strived to be here. This was their end goal. America was better than any other place they had been to. And this may be true for some of them, but I would say for Iranians living in the US now, this is the majority, not the case. A lot of them came here for a short amount of time to either study here or to just wait out a couple years of unrest and then go back. That was my parents' idea. The America for my parents was just a study abroad that went really, really long. And when I learned this as a kid, it really threw me because it was the first time I realized that what I'm taught in school and what my reality is does not match up. And it's something that stuck with me. And so this project really brings together the stories of my family and of me the experience of my uncle being a teenager during the hostage crisis, coming to the US so excited about seeing Disneyland, and then being faced with really awful racism, and just about the community that we've created within that and the joy and pride that can be sourced from that. And that's it.
Thank you, Hannah. I did want to mention, I didn't get to say why I was so interested in everybody's projects and why we chose these four exhibitors. Also, I'd like to say Mike Stone, who had submitted the project for Open Standard Respirator, cannot join us tonight. All those guys that work at that group are always working, I would say. He texted me and said he's loading a project onto a truck this evening. So that's what he's doing right now. But they did send their regards, and their project is an open source design for a PPE respirator that can be reused and washed. And they're right now going through the whole process of FDA as well as OSHA approvals for the quality of the filters, so that they are able to kind of jumpstart the manufacturing that has been stalled by COVID right now, and that they can produce a more efficient way of fabrication as well as a more efficient filter. Because as a lot of health directors have been saying, that this new pandemic is kind of just the start of what our new lives are going to be. So that project is also part of this exhibition, part of the poster series that you can access with QR codes as well for the interactive part. For each of these projects, we were really looking for diversity in design disciplines as well as different equality user groups. For Hannah's, I specifically was very interested in her project because it spoke about this very niche sort of generation that has to deal with this idea of dual identity, which I, maybe a little biasly, do identify with personally because my parents are from Taiwan as well. And I see a lot of people talking about this more and more every day. For Lindsay's project specifically, I love the idea of the concepts of this flexible and open, encompassing idea of the sports bar that is anti-sports bar coming to fruition both in form as well as concept. And for Hannah and Nancy, this process that you two go through in this really difficult conversation that I think that a lot of people need to have, whether privately or publicly, that you guys have the courage to kind of open up and let people hear that conversation. I think that's something that more people need to be vulnerable and allow for understanding that they may be wrong, and that educating yourself isn't about who's right and who's wrong, but that you're open enough to kind of accept and listen. So yeah, thank you everyone. We do have a few more minutes left that I would like to introduce Valentina and Fatma from Night Kitchen Interactive. They are our brilliant and very quick, I would say, designers that handle the AR and VR interactive portion that I thought was very important, that we tried to experiment with this format for a virtual exhibition, because if we are all on the internet all the time, what's the point of just looking at something when you can look at something in person? I really wanted to try and bring these projects alive for each of the designers. So Valentina and Fatma, if you guys would like to talk a little bit about the approach of how you guys came to creating the format of, correct me if I'm wrong, spark filters through Instagram. Is that correct?
Yep, that's it. Thank you so much, Christine. And again, thank you so much for including us in this exhibition. It was really an honor working alongside such distinguished designers and getting to interpret their projects from such a range of different formats and ideologies and inspirations into one way to activate your users for Design Week. So we're from Night Kitchen Interactive. We're a Philly-based digital media company, and Night Kitchen's been around for over 21 years at this point. But I've been here for 5 years, and Fatma's been here for about a year and a half, something like that.
Yes, about a year. a year now.
Yeah. And we thought this project was a really exciting opportunity to think about augmented and virtual reality, because you are trying to establish the immediacy of walking into an on-site exhibition at Cherry Street Pier or something you might stumble across and be curious enough to try out for a little bit, and then have opportunities to learn more online. So in trying to give visitors a taste of these exhibitions, we were attracted towards Instagram because we felt that it offered a very low barrier for people who might be on their phones looking for something to do and then come across this poster. So scanning that QR code will open Instagram if it's installed and bring you right to the AR content in the forms of a filter. And this is different than the kinds of online exhibitions we've done in the past, in that, you know, we've done everything from huge scale websites for the Smithsonian to like things that you can actually touch and interact with, like touchscreens at a museum. And this is an opportunity to make something that could live anywhere. You can take a photo of, you know, the beautiful flag that Hanna provided as a website element on her project in your own backyard and see it waving. Or for the open PPE respirator mask, you could use the filter to try it on and see what it looks like. And that we felt was very different than the kind of behaviors you might have on site somewhere, like seeing it in a glass case as part of a physical exhibition. So yeah, I was just really excited to get to, you know, work within this platform with these designers, and especially under the time constraints of, all right, everyone, let's pivot due to COVID, working within a platform that's already established, that has its own maintenance. You know, Instagram has their way of doing things. So being able to work within those guidelines allowed us to really focus on what kind of content do we want to work with. And Fatma, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. And if you wanted to screen share as well.
Yeah, sure. Inspired by Lindsay, I also am going to and Lindsay and Hannah, I'm going to screen share and show just what the filters look like. So you have kind of an idea of what we're talking about. So it's not just an abstract idea. Do you see what actually, sorry. Just 1 second. Share screen. And then screen one. Okay, so this is Val trying out one of our filters. So this was the Open PPE project. And the idea here is you see those red particles coming in. So that's the bad air. And then as you open your mouth, the particles are getting cleaned and the green particles are coming out. This was really fun to make. And as I was making this, my jaw started hurting because I was opening and closing my mouth. And yeah, it's super fun. And it's also just an interesting way of experiencing these designs, because if this was at a museum or if this was a conference, you would probably see this in like a glass box from a distance, but you can actually try it on, I mean, virtually, and see how it look on your face and play around with it. And it's super fun. So you should go on Instagram and try it. And I can show the other ones quickly. This was Lindsay's project. And I mean, I love the idea of a woman's sports bar, because I've felt very unwelcome in, especially when it's like a sports site and then it's just not a great environment. So I'm excited for this to actually open up and to go to it when things get back.
Same.
I love this one too. And I also like how we sort of came up with this approach of doing VR within an AR platform. So this is actually like, you know, a cube map around you that you're able to look around in the space, because we felt that architecture required an immersion in a space instead of something that you would like see a model on your desk or something. So in VR, you can take a render from the Rhino models that Lindsay provided us and have it all around you so you can look around on your own.
And I love how her rendering style becomes an environmental aspect to it. It's just like, it's really cool that it's not like, oh, here's like a really clean photographic rendering, which whoever knows me really well, they know I hate, that this becomes an environment, but it's stylized and it still conveys this kind of idea and feeling that you get in this space, where it feels very modern and cool with these materials, and even the people feel really neat. So I thought this one came out really well. I think all of them came out really well, honestly.
That's the idea with online or like virtual exhibits. It's just, how can we make it different than a physical exhibit? Because if you're trying to replicate a in-person experience, then it just comes across as a worse version of it. And I personally don't enjoy it. So like, I could just go to this in person. Why am I not doing that?
Agreed.
I think instead of that, we're kind of focusing on how, like, what an experience that can't happen in real life. So that just makes it more exciting, and it was really fun to brainstorm together. And then third one, Hannah's, which we went through. It was a process. We had different versions and Instagram's guidelines. But this is really, I mean, I can also really relate with Hannah's project. My parents are Turkish, and just that idea, the idea of like dual identity. So love this project. And I mean, I don't know, Val, if you had anything else you wanted to add about this filter in particular.
Yeah. Well, I will say that there's an alternate version of this project that will be up on the website that shows actual photographs from Hannah's website and some audio clips from her uncle talking through the memories of Iran and America and what that intersectionality is like. One of the biggest challenges of working within Instagram is their policies. Like, we found when trying to publish it that because it showed a photo of a child's face, it was flagged because you can't post photos of anybody else's children under a Facebook or Instagram promotional material. So that required some pivoting that perhaps we wouldn't have had to deal with if we were building our own solution and had more time to think about it. But in the end, we had so many great ideas for Hannah's that I think the hardest part was, which one do we go with? So when we couldn't go with photos, we still had the flag idea, like, that I kind of wanted to do anyway in the background. So we have both of those up that will be on the website.
It's really fun to see where you can place this in your house and see how it looks on a table and different rooms. So it's another fun one to play with. And then the fourth one, this was also really fun. We have that environment and we have that pattern that Renee and they were talking about. And this was really fun. And I love the pulsing outline effect. And again, you can take a photo of it and share it with your friends, and it makes this content more accessible and shareable. So it's really exciting, and I'm excited to work on all of this.
Yeah, and that is Renee speaking about what that print means, and she talked a little bit about who those people were, the design of the voter's hand that kind of resembles the houndstooth, and I think where we kind of concepted this idea was from all the Zoom videos that you guys provided, Nancy and Renee, that I listened to every single one, this idea of empowerment and being within that environment. You're not wearing it as a coat or a bag, but you're creating this environment of that pattern and sitting within it. And that is hopefully also doing the same thing where you feel empowered and you learn about these women.
Yeah, I especially love just listening to the audio as I found myself having the filter on and trying to match like different clothes that I had to the background. Like, if I were to get this coat, would this scarf look nice with it or something? So it was kind of just fun to interact with these filters rather than just having like the texture on its own on a website somewhere.
Yeah, and speaking of fun, I think part of design, I think a lot of people think that they're not interested in it that they think it's this high-end thing. And I think design needs to be, in order to be accessible, needs to have a level of fun to it and exploration. So I think that the format that Valentina and Fatma kind of chose through Instagram and this playing of these projects, and it's the extension of these ideas, just helps to lower that barrier for everyone to get into. So design can change a lot of things, and I really believe in that. And everything I try and do, I try to push that idea. So thank you for helping with that, everyone, really.
Oh, no problem at all. And the last thing I want to say is just knowing that this was the centennial anniversary of the women's suffrage movement made this so much more fun to work on, honestly, because we had Fatma, myself, and our Drexel co-op, Anna Mattioli, working on these. So it was like 3 women in tech, which is already a pretty, male-dominated field, just working with these amazing designers to make something fun out of it. And it really gave us a chance to play a lot with the designs, and we appreciate giving that opportunity.
Yes,
I think when you can play with stuff and collaborate with people, that's when you get the best projects out. And I really think this is a good case study for that. Rebecca, do you have any other points before we open it up for questions?
I just had one kind of point, which might lead to more questions. I think the one thing, you mentioned it, Christine, we were talking about Mike's, the open standard respirator project. One of the things that really, when we first talked to him, like light bulb went off in my head, was about sort of intellectual property and how that creates this like bottleneck of being able to get PPE in a global pandemic to as many people around the world as possible. Because if 3M owns all of the intellectual property, then a manufacturer that has a plant and material ready to go can't just start making 3M masks because 3M owns it, right? And so what was so like inspiring and kind of like, wow, is like global health isn't very unequal. Right? Around the world, people do not have access to things that they need to keep them safe and healthy, like across the board. We know this. And so it was really interesting to me what he's done is created a nonprofit that essentially, allows these manufacturers to license for a very small fee. Like it's free if you're going to make 10,000 or less, in a way that's like leveling the playing field to when we need to sort of, for example, if we don't have a president who enacts the Defense Against, Manufacturing, whatever that is, Protection Act, that manufacturers' hands aren't tied, right? That they can actually jump into action, and make and produce something that the end user will know will work. Because tons of people were manufacturing things and calling it stuff, but we all knew that they don't really work as well as they're supposed to work. And so I thought that was like an amazing thing that they created something with something. What did they say, Christine? Like 15,000 engineers on a Slack channel. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, they were saying it's just this open Slack channel and all these engineers with all these different projects and ideas about how to address this problem of pretty much a limited supply of PPE across the board, and what can they do as engineers to start to get these out. I think there was a lot of movement in that, where there was a lot of at-home DIY makers that were producing what they could on little 3D printers, but that can only go so far, and there is this whole other industry of manufacturing that was essentially just dead, that could have been producing all this stuff, but because of trademarks and all these other kind of red tape sort of things, it kind of showed that there's a problem here, that designing the system for it is just as important as designing the product.
Right. And I could just, we mentioned that the posters that have the QR codes, they'll be digitally, they'll be on the website, but they'll also be in Instagram and whatnot. But we do have 10 locations throughout the city. So I'll just share those. They'll go out, so they'll be on our website and in social media, but it's going to be in Spring Garden at 990 Arts inside. It'll be at Cherry Street Pier. It'll be at Bach in South Philadelphia. It'll be in West Philly on 52nd Street. So Wheat Paste, they're going to have that up tomorrow because it rained. They couldn't get that up today. It'll be in Manayunk at Kismet in the window. It'll be in Germantown at Senator Art Hayward's office in the window. It'll be in East Passyunk Avenue in a storefront window. In Head House Market on South Street in an empty storefront window, and then also in Kensington at Shift Capital. There's a Wheat Paste along I forget, 2800 D
Street, I think.
Yeah.
D Street, that's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got it spread out across the city, lots of different places. It's great if you want to go for a walk and check out the posters and interact with the QRs, you can. Otherwise, you can access it on social media. So.
So if you guys have any questions,
yeah, go ahead, Christine, sorry.
Oh, I was saying, if anyone has any questions, I think Zoom has this like raise your hand sort of function, right? Is that still a thing?
I don't know. Or you could just put it in the chat.
Yep.
While
we're waiting, if anyone has any comments about each other's projects, I think this might be the first time where you guys saw everything as a whole for the exhibitors.
Yeah. Hannah, I thought maybe, could you speak to the hand-drawn Iranian flat Persian rug as a flag, and sort of like how you felt about that and why that was sort of symbolic for you?
Yeah. So that idea is definitely layered and pretty complex. I would say that the Iranian people are incredibly proud of their history of craftsmanship and rug making. We're famous for them. But I think that with that pride we have in it, there's also this other side of it that our culture has often been reduced to the products that come from it. This idea of the Orientalist gaze of different cultures from white populations. So this idea of taking pride in something, but also knowing that it's used to encompass your entire identity. And there's that double-edged sword about it. So the idea of it being a flag and as a symbol, I was equally for it and against it. And that's what I liked about it. I liked that it represented this very complex thought about pride in craftsmanship and history, but also knowing that it's used to reduce an entire culture to just what everyone knows about it, which is Persian rugs and Persian cats too, but mostly Persian rugs. But yeah, that's the idea behind the flag.
Thank you for sharing that. Do we have any other questions or comments? Yes. I know. Thank you, Barbara, for your comment. It did occur to me that, you know, we really were, this project was open to everyone, but we were really stoked that we had so many amazing women on all facets of this project. It was really fantastic to work with each and every one of you. And like I said, I'm really very proud. All
Thanks,
right.
Barbara. That's my old mentor, or still mentor, really.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah.
And she's an architect as well, so she knows the deal with being a women designer in the field.
Yeah, maybe to that point, I'm just curious if any of the other designers had thoughts about sort of their practice being a woman. It came up in a lot of the presentations tonight, whether the projects were focused on women or, you know, acknowledging being a minority within the various disciplines that we're working in. And, you know, I think to kick it off, Valentina and Fatma being the kind of tech designers, so curious about like your other work and how being, you know, the minority women in that field kind of, you know, affects your work.
Oh, thank you for asking that, Lindsay. I think, well, at Night Kitchen, we are fortunate that I think at this point, Fatma, right, we're majority woman company. I'm thinking like Ethan, Matthew.
Yay.
Yeah, and the rest are women.
Awesome.
You know, interns and co-ops accepting, we do have Kendall, who's very talented, and he's a guy too. But I would say in virtual and augmented reality, especially, it is very much a boys club. Like if you saw Ready Player One came out, I think a year or two ago, I feel like you have that same sort of like gamer shooter mentality in a lot of the video games that are coming out. But since we at Night Kitchen work with museums, arts and culture as our primary client, all of the curators, and well, not all of them, but it's majority woman in terms of curators and content development for that. So I think that sort of helps me exist on the boundary between the tech and the art world and have a little bit more balance there. But Fatma, do you have any thoughts on that?
I also feel very fortunate at Night Kitchen having more women there and not feeling a minority, that definitely isn't as common. And so I'm blessed. And also working on projects that where I feel like I'm making a difference and can actually share my voice and be part of something that I support is always great. And thank you for including us in this project, because it's just added to that feeling.
Happy to have been working with you guys. Really, it was a joy working on the collaborative portion of getting these out. I really, really appreciated your guys' input on every single facet.
Of course, and Christine, you are a wonderful curator to work with. The way that you helped tie everything together was really admirable.
That was my one job, is to tie it all together. That's all I had to do.
I guess I'd like to say something real quick. I'd like to thank everyone for allowing me to be involved as a gender non-conforming person, just to be invited into something like this that is about women and women's rights. It's really important to me as well. And it's just really empowering to be surrounded by all of these talented people and to hear all of you talk about everything. And it gives me hope for things going forward.
Oh my gosh, right?
Really
That's how
does.
I felt.
It's how I felt.
Me feel better.
Exactly. Yeah. Being surrounded by people like all of you has just made things feel a lot better.
Yeah. A lot more normal, for sure. Yeah. And I think designers need to do their best at being socially cognizant of what they can do, because we do have power. And again, design, we may just work in this like design world, which usually has to do with capitalism, but there is power within that system as well.
Yeah. And I think having these discussions and talking about those uncomfortable challenges, and I think especially for me, being a Black woman, being 53 and being a Muslim has had its challenges, but I think I've learned to be able to have those challenging conversations in a way that makes someone feel comfortable enough to have them, because I do like to address the issues. Like, I'm not the type of person who likes to just sweep it under the rug or just let it go. Like, even when I was on the show, I think I was very vocal in letting them know the lack of diversity that I saw, because to me, that's offensive. Like, I'm sitting here in front of 15 people and I'm the only Black. Like,
yeah,
that just, to me, that like, I was disturbed about that. And to be able to have the ability to bring that to someone's attention in a way that would help them try to move forward and grow from it and make change is important. And it was difficult for me, because even I told Nancy, I said, sometimes people don't understand the hurt and the anger that Black people have. Like, sometimes we're angry. Like, it's a thing. Like, you have to sometimes say to yourself, like, Black people have a right to be angry.
Well, after having to do what you have to speak up all the time and it's not changing, of course you're going to be angry. If I ever have to say anything twice, I get angry. Like, come on.
So I think being able to be patient enough to have those conversations and being patient enough to understand and being sensitive to the fact of, like Nancy was telling me, how for her, she didn't know any of this. Like, she grew up and she wasn't educated. She didn't go to school and find out. But me being sensitive to that, in addition to saying to her, being comfortable to say to her, but why wouldn't you educate yourself? Like, right. Why wouldn't you? Like, right. Why wouldn't you research? We research so many things about life, about people, about different people, but why wouldn't you do it for Black people?
Well, see, that's the thing that I think I got out of it too, was because as we're taught history, you think you're being taught history.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started doing the research and finding out, no, slavery did not end when they said it ended. You know what? It wasn't, it's still here. It's just they gave it a different name. It's a prison system. It's this. So, So I thought I was learning the truth. I thought I was being educated. And now, you know, I learned as an adult when I start working with the refugee community, and knowing that what was being told to us as what the refugees and immigrants go through is wrong. I knew I had to educate myself. Well, I didn't realize that I had to be educating myself all along. And that's what angers me the most, is the propaganda that we are taught growing up. It's not the truth. But I learned, like, it's little things I learned. When we were writing something so small, but it's big, we're writing the descriptions. And when we were like, well, the women are Black, but why do we have to say they're Black? Like when we talk about Renee Hill is a Black designer from Philadelphia, we don't then go say, and Nancy Volpe Beringer is a white designer from Philadelphia. But we do it all the time with Renee. Like, oh, she's a Black designer. They don't say I'm a white designer. And why do we need to do that? I guess because we need to do that. I don't, you know, so there's little things. It shows how far we still need to go.
Yeah.
You know, just one little example. And so it's just, again, it's educating and knowing that somehow, you know, as history is being written, trying to teach our children the truth.
And I think you guys are amazing for putting this together, to have these discussions. Like, because if you didn't do this, like, you know, we wouldn't be here. So like for you guys to do something to this level and to have this open discussion is so important, because I believe that we all have an obligation to, and as you said, Christine, we have platforms. And if we have a platform that we can, you know, have a voice and get it out there, then we should utilize that. I think that's our part of our obligation, to inspire and empower people.
Yeah. So we are at 7:04. We stayed within our timeline that we said we would. Any last wrapping up comments, Rebecca?
There's a question, actually.
Yeah,
Oh, shoot. I saw Christina's question. I totally forgot about it.
Yeah. Thank you, Christina, for the compliments, and I agree with everything you're saying. I think, you know, I write grants. I have to write 2 this week. So I think, you know, during the festival, no big deal. But I do think that I've pitched Pew a lot. I've pitched the NEA every year. I pitch the NEA different projects. And so if you wanted to reach out to me, I'll drop my email directly in the chat. We can have a longer conversation. I think this project took, I think, longer than Christine and I thought it would, because I mean, we literally started in March, right, Christine? Like,
we started earlier than that. We started last year just talking about the ideas to suss it out, because you guys were in the process of writing the grant. You're like, I think I have this. Would you be interested in working on this? And then we didn't hit the ground running until about March, right after I had finished one giant project. And I was like, let's go full force on this. And I was like, oh yeah, this won't take that long. And then we are, you know, up until today, like we have one more component that we're just cleaning up and finishing up, and then we'll be done. So it took, you know, over a year conceptualizing, especially when you work with grants. It's like you need to check in, make sure you're staying true to what that specific grant was asking for, but also staying true to the objectives here. And I really wanted to make sure we weren't overstepping on certain ideas or misrepresenting things. So that took a lot of time in editing and thinking about how we were formulating these ideas. So
I think the you know, Nancy's comment about, you know, kind of having to name it, you know, to sort of like call out, you know, being a Black woman designer, and, you know, Zaha Hadid, one of my heroes, said, you know, I'm not a female architect, I'm just an architect, you know. I think it's a double-edged sword, really, because the point is that, like, if you ask somebody, even architects, name, you know, 10 famous women architects, they go Zaha, Denise Brown,
Billy Stein.
Right. Like, so their invisibility, the deliberate invisibility, is why it's important to sort of have these lists and have these exhibitions. So Christine, we probably started with like let's just highlight all the most amazing women designers that, you know, that, because Design Philly has a pretty public audience, right? So it's about 40% designers, design professionals, and 40% not designers. So we also do think about just that education piece, like how many designers, famous, you know, people that have influenced the whole world came from Philadelphia. I mean, that's one of the things we like to do. But I think where we ended, especially as we started really digging in March in the middle of COVID, just like, okay, that's not what the direction we sort of want to go. We want to go into thinking about equality in a much more expansive way. And I, again, credit Christine and thank her for that, because I think it really did pull together beautifully. So.
Thank you. And thanks for asking me to do it. Thanks for everyone for joining in who is still here with us, and all the exhibitors. Again, look for the posters. The website will be going live shortly. We're just fixing some tweaks and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's getting pushed any minute now because I just got a notice from our hosting service. So it'll be live any minute.
Yep.
Go
to the organization's website, designphiladelphia.org. They'll have a link there to the exhibition website that houses everything. And you can also learn more about each of the projects. The posters could only hold so much information. So I hope you guys, when you have some downtime, sit down, you know, play through it. And the QR codes will be up there too. So you can play with the Instagram filters as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Fun. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.